Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our July training session for the Work Study program. My name is Josh Leonard. I am half the Work Study team. Thomas Harper is the other. He's not with us today, but Thomas is responsible for all of the good things in the program, I assure you. All of the things that need a little extra help or work, that's me. You can reach both of us at the email listed on the screen, work-study@unc.edu, and I'll repeat that a few times throughout the presentation. So if you ever have any questions, comments, concerns, anything that we can help you with, that is the place to go. Today, we're going to be covering a few different topics. We're going to start by looking at the program itself, a quick overview of the logistics, the training and registration process for those individuals who may not be registered work-study supervisors yet, but need to take that step before they post their jobs. It's also highly relevant for those of you who are in the program currently and just need to re-update your annual training and registration in order to post positions. We're going to transition to talking about a few updates for the year, especially in deference to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and how we're responding to those challenges. We're going to talk about the rules and regulations. We're going to do this with a high-level overview of the most common issues that maybe people miss or the things that are most relevant to the day-to-day positions. And then we're going to transition right into the topic of the day, which is hiring in JobX. Highly relevant because that's going to start very, very soon. And then we're going to talk about wage tracking and over-earning prevention, one of the most common errors. How do we avoid it? Save you some time, save the program some issues. And then we're going to talk a little bit about student evaluation and development, which was the requested topic for this presentation based on some survey information and some feedback from the community. And then, of course, we'll save time at the end for Q&A, which will be off the recording session. If you're reviewing this recording at a later time, please, again, feel free to email any questions to work-study@unc.edu. So here we are, program overview. How do you get to be a part of the work study program? Well, it always starts with evaluating and deciding whether the program is a good fit for you. Of course, this program does have some regulations because we are using federal money that don't always fit with everyone's needs, but for the most part, we find that the program is adaptable, it's accessible, and it provides a good service for every department and every potential position. To get started, you first have to complete two processes. These are annual processes. There's a review of the regulatory and logistical training and the JobX training, JobX being the online system we use to both post jobs, receive applications, hire students, and track some of the information. If you, then you also have to annually complete a work study quiz and obtain a 100% score. I promise it is not hard to obtain a 100% score, although I did have one question this year that seems to be throwing a couple people because it is a two-part question. It says down at the bottom that's a two-part question, but a couple people have skipped by it. So if you're getting 95s on your score, maybe go back and look for that one. If you're a new supervisor, you will then need to complete a registration form and send that in, and my team will be happy to grant you access to JobX. I'm putting in the chat window right now a link to a PDF that contains information on this process. It's a quick overview, and you can find it on our Supervisor Resources site. Here is the Federal Work Study Supervisor training site where all of the logistical and regulatory training and the quiz is housed, as well as a link to our Supervisor Resources site. It is public access, so anyone who is a UNC employee and has an onion can log into Sakai and find this. There's a couple ways you can do it. The easiest one is displayed on the screen where you go into sakai.unc.edu. Under the Home tab, there's a worksite setup search, and this allows you to find any public access site and any private site that you have access to, and simply type in Federal Work Study Supervisor Training. That site looks exactly like this. As we've discussed, there are two trainings you'll need to complete on an annual basis. The first one dealing with regulatory issues, logistics. The second one being how to actually utilize the software to create and post a position, review applications, hire students. The annual quiz is down there. Again, you will need a 100% score. 95 is just not quite good enough, I'm sorry. And we do have a link over here for new supervisors to complete our registration form so that we can provide you access to that site. And of course, a link to our Supervisor Resources website where we keep all of our best tricks, tips, hints, spreadsheets, documents, PDFs, online evaluation forms, and everything else you might possibly need to be a wonderful part of our program. If you ever find that you're missing something or you need additional information and you can't find it there, please let Thomas and I know at work-study@unc.edu. We're always happy to create new tools for you. So let's look at the logistical process. We actually opened this year on June 1st, and through July 3rd, we had our priority submission window, hoping that everyone could get in as many positions as they could during that time. Of course, we know with COVID and the plan to return to campus still being up in the air, that departments have needed additional time and probably will need additional time to create and revise positions this year. In deference to that, we are allowing jobs to be posted through November 1st, which is months later than our typical deadline. So if you find in the middle of the year that you need an additional student, you need to revise some duties, potentially there's some questions you have, and you may need to make some adjustments to the positions, we will be allowing that. The one caveat to this is if you have already hired a student and you have a plan of action, they have performance goals, we've reached that step, you can't go back and revise their job without discussing it with them. Of course, you would do that and then modify the position. Anytime you submit a position, there is a manual step that Thomas and I have to go through where we do inspection. This requires you to submit the job to the listed or pending approval queue. We will send a confirmation email to you through JobX as soon as that occurs, so you know exactly what's happening with your job. The jobs are posted, and beginning on the 17th, tomorrow, for the students who were submitted to the early rehire program, those whose jobs were completed and inspected by July 3rd and submitted the necessary documentation, they'll gain access tonight at midnight. So I will be up at 11 if anyone needs anything last minute. And those students will be able to log in the system on the 17th. All other students will gain access on July 20th, somewhere around the beginning of the work day. Beginning on those same days, we no longer have the one-day delay. You are free to begin reviewing applications, interviewing students, and hiring students in the system with the goal of getting students in and started earlier. Before actually beginning duties, please make sure that you are completing that interview process. If you are not rehiring a student, all new students have to go through interviewing. Please make sure you're completing the hiring process in JobX and the onboarding process, including I-9, W-4s, and NC-4s. Those of you who are looking to hire remote or virtual students, the university does have a process where we can complete the I-9 through our remote centers. You can find more information about that on the UNCHR website, UNCHR website. But please make sure you're in communication and contact with your business and human resources personnel as they work to get these virtual remote work study students in, because as you well know, this is the first time we've allowed virtual and remote students to hold work study jobs. Now, starting on August 3rd, which is a week before classes begin, students can actually begin their work for the fall term, and that can continue through November 24th for students in fall-only positions. Federal regulations do require that students stop on the 24th because it is the last day of the academic term. Students can begin work for spring-only positions starting on January 6th under the current academic calendar. Of course, there may be some adjustments in deference to the ongoing pandemic situation. We will keep you apprised if that date changes. And then spring jobs and fall spring jobs will stop on the 4th for federal work study, or if you're in the Carolina Works program, the 7th. One thing of note, again, please make sure that you are completing the onboarding process before setting a start date and end date with the students. And if you are hiring for a fall spring position, i.e. the students and the job will both span the fall and spring terms, you can ignore the break between November 24th and January 6th. Under program regulations, we treat the entire window from August 3rd through May 4th, if work study, or May 7th, if Carolina Works, as one long window. So there is an advantage definitely to hiring for fall spring students and in a fall spring window. All right. We are hoping to have a summer work study program. We don't know. It is always contingent on funding. That announcement will be made on March 15th, thereabout, as we're able to get a grasp on our finance situation. Questions coming in for students in the early rehire program. Do we have a list that we could share with the hiring managers? We do not at this point. The list has already been generated and created. If you have a student who has been successfully submitted to the program and you included your information, you will receive notification tonight shortly after the students, so you will not be in the dark about that. The other pretty clear indication is that the students will start submitting their applications, and JobX will automatically notify you that an application has been submitted to your position. Another question that came in, do we know yet if student employment is restricted to remote only, or is it on-site also? Yes, we are allowing both in-person, remote, and mixed positions this year. This is one of the things that we'll talk about very shortly on some of our COVID response slides. A quick brief moving on here between Federal Work Study and Carolina Works, because we do have questions from time to time on what is the difference between the program. Federal Work Study, or FWS, is funded largely by the federal government and the university being the larger of those two, and of course in recent years by an employer match. This year we are transitioning to a 30% employer match, as we've talked about for the past couple years. The program is fall, spring only, no summer. It is a larger population of about 5,000 students, and because there are federal regulations and federal funds involved, it does have much tighter regulatory restrictions around the types of duties that can be performed, when students can perform them, so on and so forth. All that information is covered in the annual training, and we'll highlight some of those points coming up shortly. The Carolina Works program, on the other hand, unlike the Federal Work Study, is not funded by any federal or state money. It is entirely funded by private donors with an employer match, and as part of the structure of that program, the way it has been, for lack of a better term, sold to donors, is that it is a 50-50 match between the donors and the employers. And this program is primarily set up to help students from a slightly different background. There's still students who have a financial need, but that level is lower than for a lot of our traditional work study students. So these are students who want to work, but unfortunately have not qualified for the Federal Work Study program. It has the advantage over Federal Work Study of being a fall, spring, and summer program. So we are able to offer students positions in the summer terms. It is a much smaller population, but the advantage of that is we are also able to add students to this population that might not qualify for Federal Work Study. So if you ever have a student who is interested in pursuing work study but didn't qualify for a Federal Work Study award, you can have them email us at work-study@unc.edu, and we are happy to evaluate and see if we can provide them an award. And it also has, as I mentioned, looser restrictions. No federal money means no federal regulations, so we can allow things like operating vehicles, which can be very useful this year when we are working with a more remote population. Both programs utilize the same training that we've already discussed. They utilize the same JobX system for posting jobs, reviewing applications, and hiring students. The team's the same, Thomas and I, and it is the same logistics and payroll. We did have a question come in, where does the other half of the funding come from? As I mentioned, half of that comes from private donations and the other half comes from employers. So the students' wages are paid up front using the private donations, and then we do ask that supervisors provide 50% of the students' earned wages back to the department. We'll cover the exact process a little later on, but it is 50% for Carolina Works, 30% for Federal Work Study, but that process is the same for both. So here is a little bit about our pay. You're probably familiar with these first three steps. They're the same for you, me, and work study students. The students will work, they'll enter their hours into TIM, and that money that they earn as documented on TIM will be dispersed to them through payroll. That's about a third of the actual process for work study. In order to maintain our records, we have to have accounting data generated so we can report that back to the Department of Education in order to continue to receive Federal Work Study. That accounting information has to be delivered to myself, and then we have to reconcile that against student earnings, both for communicating the students' balances on their awards and, as I mentioned, for reporting. In order to do our wage matching, that reconciliation data is also generated into a CBM, or Client Billing Management file. This is the system we use to recoup the portion of students' wages that are paid for by employers. That file is uploaded to the CBM system on the 14th of each month, where it becomes available to departmental business officers who can then review the information. If there's any disputes or questions, they're able to reach out to us, and they're able to direct that money towards the appropriate fund, because on the 21st it's processed and the funding transfers back So the employer match gets moved back to the work study chart filled string. We're able to continue to finance the program that way. All right, that's the overview of our logistics, our calendar. And I want to move into updates. What's new for this year? What's changing? What's adjusting? And of course, it's highly relevant to do that with a little nod to COVID, as things are changing largely in response to that. So our non-COVID updates, there are 3 of them. Number 1, if you haven't seen it, we have an update to the JobX site that was put forth at the end of May. That's why we couldn't start the program until June. There has been no effective changes to functionality or processes on client user ends. However, it is updated to more modern technology in terms of its layout. And it has much higher increased accessibility for individuals who need additional assistance in navigating the site. Similarly, the Office of Scholarships and Student Aid, which my team is housed under, has a new website that came into being during the spring term and has been continued to be updated over the summer. We are migrating a lot of the JobX resources to that site, especially where students are concerned. We've left a few out there because this summer work study program is still ongoing, but even those will be moving away soon. So students will be primarily using the OSSA website for their resources. They will still be applying to jobs, submitting their applications, being contacted through the JobX site. Supervisor information has been migrated in part. Mainly that's focused on individuals who aren't familiar with the program and are seeking information. Right now, we are still planning on using JobX to house supervisor resources, although we are hoping to duplicate those resources to the OSSA site so that they'll be in both places in case anyone has any problems finding them. The other big update, as we've discussed, the federal work study program is moving from a 15% employer share to a 30% employer share. We hope this is the last adjustment in the near future. I have heard no discussion about it moving any further. And this hopefully will balance our budgets, and so we won't require any further adjustments in future aid years. In terms of COVID response updates, first and foremost, if you are one of our off-campus or community service partners who are used to seeing Thomas's smiling face during the summer as we conduct our site visits, we will not be doing that. Out of respect to both your health and especially Thomas's, we can't have Thomas go down. The program will crash and burn. He's the heart and soul and all the good things about this. So we want to keep him healthy and happy. We are still collecting the documentation that would normally come with the site visit, but we are doing that electronically through email. If you have not heard from Thomas, you should have. Please reach out to us. Again, work-study@unc.edu. We're happy to get you that packet of information if you don't have it already. Second point, as we mentioned, we are extending our fall job posting deadline. It will no longer be the end of August or early September. It will be through November 1st. We would extend it later, but November 1st is when we actually start on our spring position, so we kind of have to stop fall to begin spring at that point. So there's a nice long window if supervisors, as we mentioned, need to make adjustments, post new positions, or if simply your department's return to campus plan or staffing plans aren't ready to go at this point. You have a nice long window before jobs have to be posted. As we briefly mentioned, that third point, we are allowing both in-person, virtual, and mixed federal work study positions this year. This is mentioned in the training, and there's especially a dedicated question to it in the quiz. But it works this way. If there are any mandatory on-campus responsibilities, positions should be listed in JobX as on campus. This is out of deference to the student population who will not be returning to campus, who will be 100% virtual, so they know which jobs they do not need to return to Chapel Hill for. That does not mean that positions can't be partially or largely virtual. You are welcome to do that. You are allowed to mix the duties as you see fit. But if there is an on-campus component to your position, it should be listed as on-campus. If it is 100% virtual or remote, please list it as virtual. The other portion to this is we have and will continue to require check-in, check-out procedures at the beginning and end of each shift where the student has to be in contact with a registered work-study supervisor. And the other regulation that we still have to meet is supervisors have to be in contact with students anytime they are working. We are moving those 3 items to be virtual optional. So you do not have to physically meet with the student at the beginning and end of the shift. You can do this virtually, remotely, online. Departments last spring and over the summer have reported using Skype, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Slack, just a basic phone call or video phone call, something like FaceTime. We also have had departments who are using email. There's opportunities through Blackboard where students log in and you can communicate with them. If you're part of the campus that is using Skype for business, you can see my screen right here. That's a great way to see where people are, if they're working, be able to contact them. So the point to all this is we still need every supervisor to meet with students at the beginning and end of their shifts to know when students are working. And we need you to be available in the middle of the shift in case students need to reach out to you. Tim is not good enough. Thank you for posing that question, because it does not provide a confirmation in real time. Students can simply log into Tim and put in their hours before or after the fact. So this does need to be a real-time communication. If you are using email, supervisors know you don't immediately need to respond. I highly recommend, however, doing so. Actually, if you're looking for a full recommendation, something like Zoom or Microsoft Teams, something where there is a two-way real-time communication is ideal in order you to not only say hi to that student and continue to build that relationship and open that communication, but in order to really check in with the student to know what their plan of action is for the day, for goals, for tracking. Because as we've seen students move to online, the communication around what's being accomplished and what is the plan of work for the day has not kept up in some cases. So we are really encouraging supervisors to be more communicative and open about expectations for the day, what the student's planning to accomplish, and then seeing how much of that the student is accomplishing with their checkout. Moving on to the slide, the virtual positions do still require I-9 verification. As we've talked about, students absolutely cannot be allowed to work until I-9 has been completed. Not only is that is allowing students to work without a complete I-9 a violation of program regulations, it's also a violation of federal employment law. I previously mentioned that Human Resources at UNC does have a system for allowing students to do or to complete their I-9s through a series of remote sites that are scattered throughout the state and the country. We will be taking advantage of those as a university, but again, this requires some coordination and some planning. So please make sure that you are in discussion with your HR and business officers if you're going to be utilizing that process. Campus closure, again, at this point, the roadmap does not include a plan for the university to shut down in part or in full for the fall semester, but we do need to recognize that the situation is ongoing, and there is the potential that UNC might have to take those steps to limit students' presence on campus or classes or so on and so forth. So we are encouraging supervisors to mentally prepare and to logistically prepare for what would happen if the campus does move to a partial shutdown where students are not allowed back on campus, or students are only allowed back on campus in limited roles or in limited times. And then a note down here, in the spring, for those of you familiar, students who were not able to continue their in-person jobs were provided with an alternate source of work-study funding. This allowed us to provide students with wages in proportion to what we expect they would have earned throughout the remaining semester based on their previous earnings. The federal guidance that allowed us to do that has not been extended to the fall at this point. That's not to say it won't be or it couldn't come back, but it has not been put in place at this time. So we are asking departments to think through the logistics of those situations and to plan for what duties can be completed if the in-person portion of the job has to be transitioned to remote. We did have a question come in. If students can start working on August 3rd, what is the earliest they can meet with HR to do paperwork? That has not changed from this year. As soon as the student is hired in JobX, the hiring email is generated and sent to your human resources or business officers. Students are free to begin their paperwork. HR or business officers will need that information to put the student into Connect Carolina So there is the record upon which the I-9, W-4, NC-4, and other required paperwork can be completed. Sorry, there's another question that's come in. It's a bit longer concerning the language with virtual students. Students can work during holidays within fall and spring semesters provided a registered WS supervisor is present and also working. Does this mean that they can only work if we can manage them in person, or is virtual supervision okay? The answer to that is, if you are working, the student can be working. Present does not mean in person. Present means that you are working. So for example, if you take off, let's say 2 weeks for the winter break, and you're the only supervisor on the position, the student cannot be working while you are off. You need to be checking in and out with the students beginning and into their shifts, and present in case the student has questions, concerns, or a potential emergency arises in the end. I hope that answers the question. Okay, getting ahead, excellent. Moving on a little bit from our COVID. These are some planning steps, some recommendations we're putting out there. The first one, of course, is training, because we know the campus will be open for the first few weeks in August. That's the plan that we have in place. Any training that you have that you might be spreading across the course of the semester, we would highly recommend front-loading that and developing a list of all the potential trainings that you might need over the course of the year, and finding which of those can be done online. So if you're unable to front load all of your training, making sure you have a backup plan so that the students are able to complete those steps virtually or via an online meeting with you. Again, preparing for partial or full shutdowns, looking at the duties on the position, potentially modifying them, which duties have to be done in person, which can be done remote, which are flexible, which of those duties absolutely are required of this position, which ones are just nice to get done, and which ones are sort of optional. If you think through those frameworks, it helps to set up which positions can be done under partial and full shutdowns. We also have on the next slide a list of some suggestions of remote capable duties. Certainly not an exhaustive list, but just to get the wheels turning. We're also asking that during orientation and onboarding, potentially during interviews, if this is a highly impactful area for you, talking to students about your plans if the university does go to a partial or full on-campus shutdown, so that students know what the plan of action is and how it might adjust them. And for supervisors, we are strongly suggesting that in completing interviews, you talk to students about their willingness to work under these different scenarios. If you're discussing with a student who might have some health issues, who might be immunocompromised, of course, we want to prioritize their health and safety. So ensuring that we are able to provide remote duties for those students would be key. This is a list of potential projects that we've gone back and looked at positions, we've gone out and researched, and as a team we've come up with that are sort of broadly applicable that supervisors and students might want to consider. These are projects that could be done remotely in almost every case, and they could be extremely helpful to departments in one or more cases, items on this list, and they can definitely be done if we do have to transition. This is not meant to be a list of things that you have to include or have a punch list of, but they're merely to get the ball rolling and to get you thinking about projects that you might be able to issue if we do move into sort of an altered state or need to move to more remote focused positions. If you'd like to take a screenshot, you're welcome to do so at this point. We are not going to be sending this list out through the listserv, but it of course will be in this training, so you will have access to it at any point. I'll give everybody a few more seconds here in case they want to grab a screenshot of it, and we're going to move on now. Okay, so let's talk about everybody's favorite topic, rules and regulations. All the things that we can and can't do. I know. Everybody loves boundaries, right? So this is on the left side of the screen, the index to all of the rules and regulations for the Federal Work Study Program. The actual rules and regulations span a whole chapter of the Federal Student Aid Handbook, which is somewhere around 1,400 pages long on an average year. On the right side, this is the summary of the additional rules that we have at UNC. I have to read these every year. I don't really think it's probably the best use of every work study supervisor's time, so we try and condense these down. And the information that you need to know is contained in 3 places. the work study supervisor regulatory training, the work study JobX training, and the annual update guide, which is also a posted version of the quiz for those supervisors who don't have access to JobX. This is why we mandate all three of those items and why we require 100% grade on the quiz in order to make sure that everyone is up to speed with these regulations. In doing so, we hope we save you some time. Instead of reading all the regulations, you can simply review the presentations and take the quiz. But I do want to run through some of the most commonly questioned or missed items, the ones that present the most problems or present the most questions for supervisors. The first one, the one that some supervisors seem to struggle with, is that the work study program is not a guaranteed funding source. It is reissued on an annual basis. Students who have a work study award in a year don't necessarily receive that every year. That's part of the impetus behind the Carolina Works program, is to try and provide more work study opportunities for students who don't necessarily maintain their work study funding. We, of course, try to provide work study funding to every student who requests it, but there is a financial limit on that, and more importantly, a regulatory limit. Students do have to display need. Students have to be hired in JobX to participate in the program. We always appreciate departments who show initiative and they really want to get their students in to the system, and they have communications with students over the summer and prepare them. But we do have cases where departments either forget to complete the JobX process or maybe neglect that, and they just hire the students. In those cases, students who are in work study and they're being hired, they're being paid through work study, but they haven't been officially hired in JobX, they are missing an essential program regulation and they are not eligible for work study funds. So please do me a favor, make sure you've hired your students in JobX before you start employing them, because otherwise the burden of those wages falls completely on the department, and we don't want that. We want to cover as much as we can. Students have to complete HR onboarding and submit proof they completed the work study training before beginning work. Students have a quiz just like supervisors. They know they're supposed to provide you documentation that they scored 100% on that quiz. Please make sure you're collecting that, and please make sure that they are getting through all of the onboarding, the I-9, the W-4, the NC-4, all of those federal and state required documents before they begin. Students can only work during academic terms. Of course, their holidays, such as the winter break, are not part of the academic terms, but as we talked about, there are exclusions to these. Carolina Works students aren't subject to the same federal regulations. Fall, spring students in a fall, spring job can work over the holiday break in between semesters. Students hired to only fall positions, fall only, so the job spans from August through November 24th. They are not eligible for that pay period. I'm sorry. Another one, while at jobs, students absolutely cannot do any academic work. This is an item that has gotten multiple schools in trouble with auditors recently. I know the name may be misleading on this topic, work study. The work and the study are meant to be separate things. They have a job while they're at college. There is zero allowability for doing academic work while on the clock, especially something to keep mind of given that we are in virtual positions. It has cropped up a couple times this summer. Just because they're logged in to work does not mean that students can be working on homework, reading, researching papers, that sort of thing. Similarly, students cannot be working while they're supposed to be in class. If classes are being scheduled and held, they are not allowed to be working during that time. Under federal regulations, students absolutely cannot operate motorized vehicles. This is a big one and a huge difference. The federal work study program under no conditions allows students to operate motor vehicles. However, they can be in motor vehicles if they're being operated by someone else. So if you have, for example, field work, students can go with you as long as you are operating the vehicle. The federal regulations do include a ban on remote work. That has been waived for the current academic year, as we've discussed. Although the check-in regulation is still in effect, students do have to meet with their supervisor at the beginning and end of the shift using, well, any real-time communication to talk to the student. Again, my recommendation is something real-time and face-to-face so that you can actually have that discussion. Students need to document their attendance via sign-in, sign-out protocol. For most people, this is TIM, plain and simple. Students cannot exceed that 20-hour per week mandate or 40 hours per pay period. If they do less than 20 hours one week, they can't do more than 20 the next. That's not how it works. There's a 20-hour work per week and a 40-hour per pay period limit. And students absolutely cannot earn more than their work-study award. I'm going to emphasize this a little bit because we have a continuing issue with this. We'll talk about why that occurs a little later in our over-earning prevention section, but please make sure you are mindful that the work-study award is the limit on the student's earnings. Previously discussed, students have to be available when a student is working. That does not mean you have to be physically with them in person. It just means you also have to be working and the student has to be able to reach you. Supervisors need to check in and out of work with students. We talked about this one. Primary supervisors, the person posting the position and who is the main point of contact for the role, needs to be permanent full-time faculty or staff. We do allow one exception for this: temporary employees who are full-time and whose term of work is as long or longer than the period of employment for the students. So for example, if you are a temporary employee and you work from August 3rd to November 24th full-time, you can be a primary supervisor for a fall-only position. Secondary supervisors, you also need to be permanent full-time, meaning that we do have some flexibility. If you have a specific case where someone who is not permanent, not full-time, please let me know. I'm happy to work with departments and individuals on those cases. Supervisors, in short, the buck stops with you. You have to make sure the students are doing what they're supposed to be doing, they're not violating regulations, and they are being paid. Program regulations include things like completing onboarding. Again, we're anticipating that this might be an issue with the virtual positions, especially for remote-only positions, accurate hours of work, working only during eligible pay periods, not exceeding our limits. A question has come in: can a secondary supervisor be nominated after a student is hired? Absolutely. We are happy to make adjustments to primary and secondary supervisors at any point during the year. We recognize that August to May is a very long time span, and individuals may find other opportunities. They may be transitioning between departments or in different places. If you ever have a situation where the job has been posted already and you need to make adjustments to the primary or secondary supervisors, please email us at work-study@unc.edu. We are happy to make that adjustment for you, as you will not be able to do it yourself. A new question coming in: is the temporary employee exception new? No, that is not a new process. We've had that for multiple years. An attached question: can a fixed-term faculty member, for example, be the primary supervisor so long as the appointment is longer than the work-study students and all the other trainings have been taken? Yes, absolutely. If you are full-time and your term of employment is longer than the period you will be supervising, you absolutely can be a primary supervisor. Basically, the regulations are there to ensure that the supervisor will be around longer than the student will be in the position. All right, the obligatory warnings and bad stuff slide, we do have to talk about this because there are ramifications, and unfortunately we have to use them every year. I have attempted to make it bright yellow in a sense to evoke some happiness along with all the doom and gloom in the words. It boils down to this: the work-study program would not exist without the federal and state funding we receive. And that funding can be reduced or removed based on violations of program regulations. As such, we have to make sure that we are at all points meeting the program regulations and requirements. If we have supervisors who are unable to do so, we do retain the right to remove them from the program temporarily or permanently. Largely, the reason this happens is we have earnings issues where departments allow students to go over and they have billed too much to the work-study program, and they refuse to correct that either through a communication issue or through a misunderstanding. We absolutely do and have actually this week shut off access for individuals in those situations. The other one, which thankfully we have not had to use in my tenure, is departments who have repeated regulatory violations on inspections, which our office does not conduct, but the Department of Education does retain the right to do. If we are finding issues there, supervisors can be removed from the program. Again, that has not been an issue in past years. I don't anticipate it being an issue in the future, but please be mindful that these regulations are there, and we do have to abide by them in order to retain funding. And if your department cannot meet those requirements in order to keep the program going for everyone else, we will continue the program without you, although we would much rather have you with it because it's much better with everybody, especially these days, right? Don't we need a little community? All right, there we go. That last bit of doom and gloom. Moving on. Let's talk about hiring because it's happening in some cases tomorrow and in all cases starting on the 20th. So hiring, here's the process. We're assuming you've gotten through the process of creating a job, having that job inspected and posted. Again, if you need help with that, we covered it in the prior training, which is available via video. The link was posted at the very beginning of this conversation, or of course you can shoot me an email and I will send you the link. In these situations, you've met with a student. If they are new, they haven't worked with you, they have completed their interview, and you are ready to extend a job offer. Here's what we recommend doing. First of all, call them, either via phone, Zoom, Skype, whatever your preferred mechanism is. Call the student and broach the subject with them. Discuss your offer. It's the best way to get a quick yes or no. We do have some students who might be fielding multiple offers because it's absolutely allowed for them to apply to multiple jobs, and sometimes the timing works out where they've got 2 or 3 offers. In those cases, again, a quick phone call will get you a quick yes or no answer and allow you to move forward with your hiring process, potentially on other candidates as needed. You do want to follow up with a written offer for clarity's sake, because we have had cases where, for example, the student's wages were in question. They thought they were getting paid one thing, the student thought they were getting paid something else, and there was a little disconnect. So I always recommend following up with a written offer. These are the items that you should include displayed here under the bullet points if you need a little help with those. Allow me, I'm going to put this in chat for those of you who are following on the recorded presentation. Oops, sorry, that should go to everyone. Sorry, Gloria, that message was not meant for you alone. This is a template. Oh goodness, sorry, I sent the evaluation form. I apologize. Here is the hiring letter template. This is a pre-filled out Word form. You can simply copy, paste, fill in the fields, send it to the student, ask them to send you a reply back, and you have documentation of the situation. Of course, a link to that can be found on our Supervisor Resources website. Right in the middle of the page, there's a nice hiring letter template, bright red arrows pointing to it. Rehire, new student, exact same information. You can send that to them and wait for the response. Once you ever apply, we'll officially need to go through the JobX process in order to hire the student. And if this is the last vacancy filled, you will need to release all the other candidates. We do require that you communicate with every student who's taken the time to fill out an application with you. There's a process by which you can simply send out a mass email to everyone you're not hiring and say, thank you, the position has been filled. Best of luck to you, which we'll cover shortly. I do want to get to a couple questions that were submitted. One of these, I think I'm going to follow up privately because it is about a specific student. The other one, you may be claiming it. I'm late in getting my job submitted, and I don't know how many positions yet. Absolutely, that's understandable. We expect that this year. We know that the number of jobs currently posted are low. We also know that the general trend for the work study posting is following what we've seen in previous years. It's just a few weeks behind. We know departments need a little more time. That is why we have extended our normal job posting deadline to November 1st. Students are aware that jobs may be rolling in a little later this year, and students actually on their own are still in many cases deciding whether they are coming back to campus or staying remote or some combination, moving to town, taking virtual classes. So we do expect those jobs are going to be coming in later. That's not a problem. We do suggest that you file positions as soon as you can in order to provide you the largest candidate pool, because we expect that the candidate pool will go down over time as students fill jobs, since everyone has access at the beginning and those numbers will dwindle. If you are in a situation where you'd like to go ahead and post your job, but you don't, or you're limiting it to returning students, as I'm seeing another question here, you can absolutely include a line at the beginning of your job posting that the position is only open to students with prior experience in your office. That is absolutely allowable, but please keep in mind you are excluding new students, so you might potentially have a second position that you could post later for new individuals. All right. I think we've caught up with questions. I'm going to move on. Let's talk about in JobX, the job hiring process. So to hire a candidate, the first step, of course, is logging into JobX, going into your job. We're assuming you're familiar with those steps from the last presentation. If you have any issues with that, please let me know. Again, I know I've repeated it a lot, but I'm going to keep repeating it. work-study@unc.edu is the best way to reach Thomas and I. You've gone in your position, and there's a link that shows you how many applicants that you have, and you clicked on it. So this is the screen you're looking at. You're ready to hire. I have blanked out the names and email addresses of students for obvious reasons, but this is the new format in JobX. From the update, you can see the dates are all from the summer. So what you're going to do is there is a drop-down button now for each individual, and you can see there are options to email, print, delete application, and hire the applicant. Never, 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 please never use the delete application button. It literally just deletes the application. And then the students wonder what happened to their application. And often they refile it, and it's just frustrating for everyone involved. So please make sure you're not using that option. If you're trying to reject somebody, we'll show you how to do that in a minute. You would use the hire application button right here. That will take you to this screen. It has a lot of useful information on it. It tells you, for example, what job you're looking at. It tells you how many openings are left. It has a step-by-step guide if you need it. It tells you which students have already been hired. And then it has a list of the students that you could potentially hire along the left side where you can check the box for one or more of those individuals. You'll click the Go to Step 2 button. You will not use this little hire candidates who did not apply online option. That had to be shut down because we had supervisors who unfortunately were attempting to hire students who were not interested in the jobs and then not releasing them. So that option is no longer with us. Students do have to file applications. You'll go ahead and hire them here by first performing a check, and it will tell you either the ID doesn't match a student on the list. This is what happens when students decline their work study at a later point, or they have it replaced by another award, or it may display that the student already has another job. That is a potential mark where you get this unfortunate little red X, but most of the time you see this lovely little green check mark. I see a question has come in. If you have a fall spring position posted and you want to hire for the fall only, you do need to take your job down and repost it as fall only. If you're hiring for a fall spring position, the expectation is you're offering that student job for fall and spring. There's absolutely nothing wrong with creating separate fall and spring postings, potentially just setting up fall now and entering spring after that November 1 deadline. Please note, if you do that, allowing students to work between November 24th and January 6th is no longer an option because the student's period of enrollment has a break in it, which is no longer covered by federal work study. For Carolina Works, different set of regulations, yes, we can allow you to have that student working over the gap, but for federal work study, fall only jobs end on November 24th, spring only jobs start on January 6th. All right, back to our presentation. You've got the lovely green check mark. The student is eligible for the position. You're going to hit the continue button and a word of warning. You have just started an invisible 10-minute counter. I have begged and pleaded with JobX for the last 4 years, ever since I was hired, to put a visible counter on this like they do for other parts of the website. They have not done that, unfortunately, so please bear in mind. You've started a 10-minute countdown. If, for example, you get up to answer an email, a phone call, something happens, the counter is still running, you can actually go into this process and have it complete without you filling the necessary information, which is kind of a bad thing, obviously. For those of you familiar with some acronyms, it's a FUBAR situation, and it often leads to supervisors reaching out to me when they're in this state or potentially this one, possibly this one, and most scarily of all, this one. Yes, the quiet rage. So please do me a favor. If you are hiring students, please dedicate some time, please set aside, please prepare, and know that there is a clock on this process that you need to adhere to. We're going to be using these yellow stars on the next few slides as an indicator of fields that you might want to think through, or you definitely need to prepare before filling out the next steps. Here, one more time, humorous warning, please don't hit the back button. Don't go back. You can never go back, bro. Those of you with children who may get the reference here. It's a quick word to the wise. If you have forgotten something and you need to transition at this point, oh, I want to look at another student, I need to match the wages for the student I'm hiring to students I've already hired, Please make sure you're doing that ahead of time. Using the back button will also violate your process. Your 10-minute clock goes to 0 immediately, and you will miss out on the one and only opportunity you have to generate the hiring email. All right, here we go. 10-minute timer has started. There's fields that need to be filled out here. A lot of them are pre-populated for you. The wages which you're going to be paying the student is the largest source of reasons why this process fails for people. They have not taken the steps that we've recommended. They did not go out with a wage rate in their offer. They don't know what to pay the student, and they have potentially forgotten which of these 4 tiers their position is in. So they're attempting to pay the student an hourly rate that is not allowable under the wage rate that they have chosen based on the duties. Please make sure that you have decided your wage rate ahead of time. For those of you who may not have taken the refresher yet, please remember which of these 4 tiers your job falls into is determined by you at the time of posting, and it is based on the requirements and the duties of the position. Within that wage tier, you have complete control over setting the hourly rate in order to ensure wage parity between any positions that you may be supervising. Please make sure you have this information planned out ahead of time. Other fields you may want to pay attention to, if you need help determining your wage level, there are 2 guides out there on the Supervisor Resources website. The determination guide walks you through a very lengthy, in-depth process, step-by-step. The form is a quick and easy tool that parallels what you have done in the job posting to find the correct tier. Both will help you find out where your position is falling within the wage range. The form or the wage level determination guide gives you a much more detailed look into the process. You also need to put in the hours per week. This is listed in the position. Again, please don't go back to the position. Don't hit the back button. Don't go back to the job and say, I think we said between 10 and 15. I think I'll put in 14. This position is not, or this information is not binding. It is simply an estimate for our records. The number of hours a student will work per week is absolutely allowed to vary between 0 and 20. As long as you and the student are mutually agreed upon the schedule, it is absolutely allowable under the position. You are going to have pre-populated dates in here for the start and end of the position. These are based on the calendar you've selected, whether it's a fall, a spring, or a fall and spring job, and whether it's federal work study or Carolina Works. There's 0 need to adjust those. It will ask you whether this is a hire or a rehire. It does help if you know if the student's coming back, because we do use this information, but we always cross-correlate any report we do with last year's hiring to ensure that information. So please don't let this throw you. There's a section for additional notes. It goes nowhere but onto the system. Don't feel like you need to put anything in here. It is an option if you would like to put in some notes. They do go into the hiring record, but they are certainly not something you need to be filling out. The last and very important field is, during this process, at this point, you will see the student's exact award amount and their balance. Balance is less relevant if you're hiring at the beginning of the year, but if you're hiring part of the way through and the student potentially has another job or has had another job, they may have less than their full award amount. This is your one opportunity to grab that information during hiring. You absolutely will need this for tracking wages and preventing overruns. So please make sure you're making a note of that here. Hit the submit request button. Supervisors who don't do that within 10 minutes, we've already talked about doom and gloom. We don't want that to happen to you. We definitely don't want you to be frustrated with this process. That brings you to the legendary, mythical, often seen, never duplicated, cannot be imitated because it's a one-shot opportunity, hiring email. For those of you who've been through the process before, this, as you know, is the email that your business officers or HR need to create an employment instance in Connect, Carolina. And if this opportunity is not fulfilled at this time, there is no way to go back and regenerate this. So please make sure, again, like we've talked about, you have the information, you've set it up, you're well within your time limit. The options you want to use on this screen, you want to send the information to the student and to yourself, so you use the both. You can see there's a to and CC line, and there's a lot of pre-populated data. This data includes all the information your HR business officer needs: student's name, their PID, all the information about the position, whether it's remote or virtual, to clue them into whether a remote I-9 needs to be completed, whether it's work study, federal work study, Carolina Works, the employment matching rate. All that information is already in here. You don't need to worry about capturing any of it, but your HR person absolutely needs to have it. So please, please, please make sure you're putting their email here. Unless your HR business officer is listed as a secondary supervisor, which we highly recommend if you would like to do, so they are definitely going to get a copy of this email, please make sure you drop in their email here and then click Sorry, there's a reminder right there. It's bright yellow now. Please list their information in this section. And then click the email hire approval. Under no circumstances should you ever click the continue without email. That button is the JobX devil. We keep trying to get rid of it. It unfortunately is hard-coded into the software. Please don't utilize it. Always send the email. All right, and at that point, if this is your last hire, as we discussed, you need to release all the other candidates. They get this lovely little red, as you can see on the bottom line, rejected flag under the emailed column once you have done that. In order to send the email saying, thank you, we filled all our positions, we appreciate you applying. You first want to check the box or boxes next to the students' names. There's a drop-down menu at the very top, and there is an option that says send reject email. You hit that option, click apply action, and it will take you to this screen where you have an option to check additional boxes for candidates if potentially you miss someone. The screen pre-populates a title and a message, which you are welcome to use. Not the nicest message in the world, but it does get the job done. You probably want to at least include your name so they know who it's coming from, so it does seem official. Feel free to adjust this message as you see fit. Then click the send button, and this will officially notify the students that you appreciate their application, but unfortunately they're not getting the job and they should look elsewhere for employment. Again, we do require that every student who takes the time to submit an application to you receives a response. So please make sure you're doing that. It is a continuing source of frustration for students every year. To clarify, if you are in an ongoing hiring process, i.e. you have hired students, you may be hiring more students later, you're potentially doing things in waves. I know this is a common practice for larger employment agencies. You do not need to reject students from a wave. You don't need to tell them we're done hiring for October, we'll reconsider you in November. It is absolutely acceptable to leave them in there. However, you probably want to include in your job posting a timeline or communicate with students that timeline so they don't know that they are waiting on the next round and sitting on pins and needles. All applicants must receive responses. There, official reminder. All right. The hiring and onboarding process based on feedback, we won't be going into that in depth this year. Supervisors said it was nice to see, but they can absolutely read through the list on their own. I am going to go ahead and include a link to it in the chat box. Oops, sorry, let me send this to everyone. Here we go. That is a list of items that we recommend as a starter point that need to be completed with every student as they are hired. Obviously, your department, your individual position, you'll need to make adjustments. Please feel free to do so as you see fit. Sorry, I had a new question come in. What are the deadlines for Carolina Works applications for students? The deadlines for all students in the program are the same. We will allow students to be hired for a term up through the last day. So if you have a student who applies and you want to hire them for fall on November 24th, you are absolutely welcome to do that. Apologies. So let's move on to wage tracking. As I mentioned, this is the #1 issue we see with the program in terms of regulatory engagement. We do have students who regularly go over their wage earnings. The reasoning behind that is actually pretty simple. There is no real-time system for us to track students' earnings and wages as they are working them. So what we commonly see is over-earnings happen in most cases, not because supervisors aren't paying attention, but because they're not tracking things in real time, simply because they don't have the capability to do. And students will go over before supervisors are aware of it, and definitely before my team is aware of it. Let me show you, for example, oops, sorry. So this is payroll. I'm going to put another link into chat window. I see another question's come in. When will students learn whether they received work study or not? They received that at the time they were packaged. For most students, this has happened months ago. We are currently going through repackaging in deference to the university's adjusted schedule and budget categories. So students, for example, who were originally set to live on campus and have now chosen to live at home are seeing adjustments being made to their budgets, which may affect their financial aid eligibility. Some students are receiving CARES funding, which may replace a portion of their work study. But students, by and large, already know whether or not they have work study because they already have their financial aid packages. Sorry, back to the topic at hand. So this is the schedule, and we're talking about the disconnect between students working and the pay information being generated. So let's cover up the non-relevant portions. And let's look at the BO4 pay period here highlighted in yellow. So students For example, maybe I'm working on August 3rd. Those students won't receive a paycheck for the hours they work on August 3rd until August 28th. And the accounting information won't be shared with my team until August 31st at the very earliest, which means if the student somehow were to go over their award on August 3rd, it would be nearly a month later before we would know about it and be able to communicate that with you. If you're relying on CDM, your business officer, to track this information, that information is even further behind because it only gets updated on the 14th of the month. So those August 3rd wages don't go into the system until September 14th. So there are pretty substantial lags in this system. So we really need tracking done by the supervisors who have information and by the students who are generating these hours to prevent these issues. This is an example to show that we are certainly not sitting by and just allowing these overages to happen. We are tracking them extensively. We go through thousands of records every pay period to try and communicate. I'll show you that process in a second, but unfortunately with the delay, we really need your help and students' help. So here's what we can do. We do every pay period, combine payroll data, previous information, and employment data into our reconciliation process. And if a student is approaching their limit within $550 of reaching their earnings, they've gone over their limit in that pay period, or they previously went over and we've been unable to resolve the issue, we will send out a communication to both the student and the supervisor, asking for help either tracking that information, preventing the student from going over, or if the student has already exceeded their award, rectifying that. If they're over, it's a very simple and quick PAT process conducted by business officers to move those wages off the work study chart field and back into payroll, and then that data gets fixed on the next payroll information cycle. For monitoring, we do have a process. Again, this is slightly delayed, but let's say you need a point-in-time check. If you go into your position, you click on the name of the position in JobX after you've logged in. You go into your applications, and you click on the name of the student, you will actually be able to see the student's award amount and their balance. This information is not real time. As you can see at the bottom, we've included a screenshot. There is an item on that Supervisor Resources site where we say what the most recent data is reflecting. But we do try and put that out every time we reconcile files. Now here's the caveat. If your job is not in the listed pending approval or review queues, you do not have access to this information. Put another way, if when you hire your last student, you move the job into storage, it is going to shear off all of the application information from that job posting, and you will not be able to access this information on demand. So we strongly, strongly recommend not moving your job into storage during the academic year. Students will not be able to see it in review. If you're done hiring, just move the job in review, leave it there. You'll still have wage tracking information, but you won't have more applications. What I think a better way to do this, on the Supervisor Resources page, there is a wonderful little tool that we put out called a time record log. I'm going to show you briefly right here. This is just a vanilla time record log. We keep an example on the first page. It looks like this. It's very simple. At the beginning of the year, as you're hiring students, you put in their name, their award, and their hourly rate, and it automatically calculates how many hours and how many dollars they have for the year. And as the year progresses, when you fill out a timesheet, all you have to do is drop in the number of hours you approved right here. And it automatically calculates the remaining number of hours and the remaining amount the student can earn each pay period. We have set these up to include up to 10 students. And there is a group tracking sheet here at the beginning where it will show all of the students and all of their awards, remaining balance and remaining hours, remaining hours and remaining dollars left. Very quick, very easy. As you fill out and approve 10 timesheets every 2 weeks, just drop the information in here. If you have more than 10 students that you would like to track, please let me know. I'm happy to update and expand this for you. Most positions don't have that number of students. It's the only reason why we capped it at 10. You are also free to hand that to the students or use this little hour planner tool below the time record log. That allows students to proactively plan out their information. And yes, I will be happy to share a link to time record log. Excuse me 1 second. Copy link and paste. There you are. On the Supervisor Resources website, under Tools, it's the very first link, or you can use that link to get to the tracker. I'll also include the hour planner. This is an item that we have listed on onboarding, but the hour planner is great because it puts the onus on the student to plan out their hours ahead of time. So they know exactly how many hours they need to work in order to achieve their award and how to reach their goals. Anita, I see your message. Shoot me an email and I will build you a custom version based on how many students you need. All right, let's talk about evaluation and development, a very relevant topic for what we are trying to do at UNC. Those of you who've been with us a while know that the work study program at UNC is a little different from many of those across the nation. We're not just focused on providing students with employment, but we are using and trying to gauge that employment in terms of personal and professional development. So we use some different tools and some different programs, many of which you may not even know are happening to help students. Why do we do that? Well, quite frankly, there's two reasons why we do that, why we do evaluations, why we take these additional steps. The first one is it's often mandated. As you can see here, we have to evaluate students. It is a required portion of the work study program. Our system requires that students are evaluated on a semesterly basis, although we do recommend mid-semester, not evaluations, but informal sit-downs to track students' progress. But the bigger piece here is the program requires us to reinforce recipients' educational program, career goals, personal development, professional development, and we've really taken that to heart, and it sets us aside in terms of what we do and how we prepare our students for careers after their undergraduate experience. Now, the framework we use for this, for those of you who are interested, is with NACE, the National Association of College and Employers, and they did a very interesting study, which I'm going to send a link to, about 3-4 years ago, where they actually went out and talked to employers and said, what skills do students need in order to be successful after college in your workplace? And they took all of these skills, they evaluated them, and they compressed them down to these 8 career competencies. And our system is all about enforcing the visibility of these competencies and helping students grow in these areas without realizing it. Those of you who've completed jobs know there's a section in there where there's a drop-down list of skills that students are building. Those skills are actually mapped to these competencies. So you are helping students see what skills they're growing. These skills are also mapped to the evaluation tool, as you'll see in a little bit, and to some programs that we do with University Career Sources to help students not only grow those skills through the positions, but be able to eloquently state how they've grown and to showcase their growth and their skill base in these areas. It's not a lot of additional work on anyone's part, but the ability to communicate that skill growth has been having profound effects on students and their prospects after graduating college, which, as many of you might guess, is finding that first job after college these days is a little harder right now in the midst of the pandemic. So this is really a key thing that we can do to help students with just a little bit of work. Yes, I've actually got evaluations to talk about right here. So this is a little bit of reinforcement on our evaluation form. Copy the link here, which I actually have pulled up. Excuse me. No, I don't. That one must have gotten accidentally close. Oh, no, because it was in web format. Here's our evaluation. They are intended to be as quick and simple as possible. I promise I have to do annual evaluations for professional staff. I know many of you either have to do them yourselves or sit through them, and they can be arduous, right? So we've attempted to make this to where it can be done inside of 5 minutes. The employee information goes at the top. There are core values which map to both the NACE competencies and to required UNC skills. It's simple. Exceeds, meets, does not meet expectations. One quick checkbox for each. There are also learning outcomes from your posting. You look at your posting, you list the skills here, and again, 3 boxes. They need improvement, they're adequate, or they display mastery. Position for notes. Position-specific tasks and attributes. These are items that the student will be doing in the course of their jobs, their duties, their performance, things that you want to evaluate the student on. And again, exceeds, meets, does not expect, need, examples. And then an overall evaluation here. And then what I think is perhaps the most important is there's a section down here for goals. We include 3. Of course, you're welcome to include more than 3, but these are items that you expect the student to grow in during the course of the year, things you want them to achieve, personal, professional, job-related. The exact goals really should be a discussion between you and the student. But the key here is that during onboarding, you set up these goals and you set up a way to measure them. And then as you meet at the end of each semester, you can talk to the student about their progress through these goals, and that will feed into their overall evaluation. So this is in 1, 2, potentially 3, and definitely 4 places how students are growing in these nice competencies with honestly little work required on your part outside of the normal requirements of any work study program. We'll also have more information about workshops that students can take these evaluations to with University Career Services for help in translating their growth into their resumes, their cover letters, their elevator speeches, those tools that they utilize to obtain positions. Again, the whole goal on this is to try and develop students. Now, we are not asking you to focus just on the personal. That doesn't make sense. You really should be looking at, in terms of these goals and performance in the student's development, job required and job related skills, goals, and growth. If there is an opportunity to include related to the job skills, you should be doing that. Perhaps there's some unrelated opportunities to grow professionally. A software suite, for example, there's some software the student could really use. It's not part of their role, but it could be utilized in their role, including the opportunity to do that. Or a set of personal skills, perhaps around better communication, better strategic thinking, things that will benefit the student in their job, but again, really aren't part of their current duties. You are more than welcome to include those in this evaluation, in this process, to work with students on developing those goals. But again, the focus really should be around job required, job related attributes, and then using personal and professional as applicable and as it can be fitted into the student's roles. So how do we actually bring all this together? How do we develop the students? How do we use the evaluation? What is the process? And it really is a cycle. We expect at the beginning of the semester you to sit down with a student and talk about their opportunities and needs, your opportunities and needs. How can the student grow through this role while still, most importantly, doing the job you've hired them to do? That conversation allows you to specify the goals, the duties, responsibilities of the position, and you develop a plan of action. When's the student going to be coming to work? What will they be doing? What are you going to evaluate their performance on? And you list those things back into the evaluation at the beginning. The student performs the work, and as they reach the end of the semester, you perform an evaluation on how they've progressed. Is the student ready for more? Are they capable of taking on additional duties or higher level duties? And the process starts over at the beginning of the next semester. The idea here is what we're setting up is this upward spiral system where the student starts out with a limited set of skills and abilities. And simply by doing their job and being focused on what they're achieving, they're able to incorporate growth into the position and become a more competent, more professional employee. That in turn does something very nice for you as supervisors. You have a more competent individual on your team who can then be assigned higher level duties, more duties because they're faster. And that takes a little bit off your plate. So in essence, by investing in these students, you're making your job easier. You're making it you're introducing the potential for the student's life to get better and to institute growth while also showing some growth for you in terms of managing people and making more time for you to take on other responsibilities, to devote more time to the backlog of things that we all have to do as state employees. That's the goal. The benefit is not just to the student, of course that is the focus, but the benefit is to everyone in the program at this point. So as a quick note, in this pandemic world we're living in, as you're thinking about those projects we talked about earlier, those opportunities for students to take on some additional responsibilities, the things they might be doing as we shut down, if it comes to that this semester, incorporating those plans, those projects, those opportunities into your goals, into the student's duties, is a perfect opportunity to perhaps give the student a little more independence, a little bigger opportunity to grow and develop some skills, as well as an opportunity to keep them being productive if the university does indeed go into a different operational state. All right, that's what I have today. Again, my name is Josh Leonard. Thomas Harper isn't able to join us, but he is absolutely the heart and soul of the other half of our team. You can reach us at work-study@unc.edu or at any of those listed websites. I am now going to end the recording and we're going to take some time, and I'm happy to answer all the questions that